Yes, hi, I'm Stuart Langridge. Title of my talk is The UX of Text. 17,000 years ago, the world's first modern French person stood in a cave and tried to find a way of telling us, 300 or so generations into the future, what he was thinking about. So he was thinking about the survival of the tribe, the glory of the hunt, the majesty of the animals sweeping across the plain, the stars in the sky. And he drew it as best he could, right? These are the cave paintings at Lascaux in southern France. This is the great bull. It's 17 feet long. It's the largest cave art animal anywhere in the world. This is the crossed bison. If you look at this, you can tell something about how they saw the world, some kind of sense of what they knew, because this is in 3 dimensions, sort of. You've got one bull in front of another. They understood the idea of perspective, of occlusion. 4,000 years ago, an unknown author first wrote down a story about the king of Uruk, which was a city in what's now Iraq. He wrote, "I will proclaim to the world the deeds of Gilgamesh. This was the man to whom all things were known. This was the king who knew the countries of the world. He was wise, he was mysterious, he knew and saw secret things. He brought us a tale of the days before the flood. He went on a long journey, he was weary, he was worn out with labor. Returning, he rested, he engraved on a stone the whole story." That's the stone. That's the first tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the world's first surviving work of literature. Gilgamesh was 2/3 god and 1/3 man. He fought and defeated the monster Humumba. He sought eternal life. Later on, 400 years into our own future, he received the ultimate accolade, which is to have Jean-Luc Picard tell his story to Dathan at Eladriel. The French chap, he liked animals. We don't really know a lot about him. Can't really tell anything other than the fact that he liked animals and understood that one thing could stand in front of another. What's the difference? Words.
Find us and move us and lift us up in ways that little being can. Do you see?
You are an oratorical snob.
Yes, I am, and God loves me for it.
You said he was sending you to hell.
For other stuff, not for this.
Words are good. Words are important. We talk to computers by pointing, tapping and clicking. We talk to a phone by tapping on the screen, talk to your laptop by clicking with mouse, right? Like a caveman, we point and grunt, and that's all we can do. We talk to one another. I'm talking to you with actual words, language, pure unvarnished text. It's 1,000 times, 100,000 times more expressive. Now, there will be those of you in the audience who think, when I say words and language is important, what I'm talking about is this, the command line, right? Not necessarily what I'm talking about, right? You'll be thinking, get lost, you horrible Linux person, you're not having my copy of Photoshop, a picture's worth 1,000 words, get stuffed. Not what I mean, right? Has anyone here played text adventures? Hands up if you have. So I've just basically identified everyone in the room who's over about 35, presumably. Everyone else is going, what? No, I call for Call of Duty, that's what I do. No. So those of you who remember them, or those of you who don't remember them rather, they were games where you could type in commands and it would do something. So the first games almost, you would guide your protagonist through a maze or through a dungeon or through a building, and you'd pick things up and you'd attack things with things, so it's all very much hit orc with sword kind of vibe. But let's imagine something a little bit more complicated. So what we're going to do here is, I put my hands up in the air and you all cheer. Put my hands down, you stop cheering, right? So, ready? Dance puppets. Thank you. You're all marvellous. Right, now imagine that as a game. So, Here we have a game. So this is Fusion. You await the glory of my words. Yes, you do. Tell everyone that. So I say, raise hands. No, no, no. It's harder than it looks, this. The screen's behind me. I say, raise hands. The audience cheers wildly. Take it away, audience. Wildly. And I can say, lower hands. Oh. Wow, this is surprisingly complicated. Lower hands. There we go. And then you all stop talking, right? Fine, no problem at all. The interesting point about this, if I just click there like that, right? How many of you in the room are developers? How many of you in the room are not developers? A reasonable split, right? So this is kind of a description of that game. What's interesting about this, and this is mainly for the developers in the room, that's actually the source code, right? That's a language called Inform 7. And that, you take that, I've defined studio venues is a room. Yep. I understand raising hands as summoning applause. When I summon applause, very good. I'm not going to make you do it again, I promise. You all cheer wildly. When I lower my hands, you stop cheering. That's the source. If you're a developer, this sort of thing ought to make you look at it and go, wow, really? That's nuts. But my point here is that language, when you're dealing with language, when you're writing a game which is oriented around and understands text, and that's the way it does it, you can do something much more expressive with English. It would be almost impossible to write a complicated 3D game using something like this. It would drive you nuts. I'm sure those of you who've been in the business for a while have seen a whole bunch of abortive attempts to make a database language which looks like English so that people who aren't programmers can use it. Never works. But for something where you're actually dealing with text, this kind of thing is a lot more doable than you'd necessarily think because language is so expressive. And this is how bots work, the point of the talk, halfway through the talk. There's a computer program, you send it text messages, it responds. It's an SMS conversation, right? The whole user experience is you write text to it, it writes text back. Now they might get augmented with the occasional picture or emoji or videos or colours or whatever, but the essence of the thing is you're swapping SMSs with people. You're swapping SMSs with the bot. So that's the user experience, and it needs to be an awful lot better than it is. This is a quotation from the Nielsen Norman Group. The user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. What's interesting about this, when I'm talking about the user experience of a textual conversation, this is where we find out, when you go back to your companies, your agencies, we find out how many of the people who call themselves UX experts are actually UI experts. Because there aren't any rounded corners in this conversation, it's just text. And what I think is interesting about this, because it's so stripped down, because there's so little there to work on, all you can do is work on the language, the feel of it. It's where the most important person on your team stops being the person who's best at Photoshop and starts being the linguist, right? The UX of talking to computers could be and should be and must be an awful lot better than it currently is. So to give you an example, if you're on a website and you're talking to a bot, you pop up one of the live chat things or something, and that's actually a bot. Do you want people to know it's a bot? The instinctive reaction is to say no. I don't think you do. You want to pretend that it's a person. But every time we try and write a computer program that actually pretends to be a person, it is hopelessly, supernaturally bad at it. And it annoys absolutely everybody. So what we really want to do is have people be aware that they're talking to a robot, talking to an algorithm, so they understand how to work with it. But equally, to understand that they can talk to it like a person. They're not typing hit orc with sword or, 10 go to 20. They shouldn't be interacting with it like it's a computer, but we need to make them aware that it is. That's a relatively subtle, nuanced thing we need to present to people. And I don't think anyone really knows how to do that yet. And that's just one example of a whole bunch of things that we need to think about in order to present bots to people as an actual useful, decent way of interacting. If we want to replace things, maybe the bot should quietly hand you off to a real person if it's too complicated. How do you handle that transition? This gets plotted on a storyboard just like every other user journey you'd go through when you go from here to here to here, except now it's all handled as text. How do you present a sense of joy or a sense of beauty when all you've got is text to do it with? If those of you who are UI designers, who are visual designers, will know that when you're building a website or when you're building an app or something like that, you'll be attempting to project a certain feeling from that app. You'll want to give people a sense of happiness or of alertness or of competence and professionalism. How do you project that when what you've got is text to do it with? Presumably, if you went to talk to the poet laureate, they'd have a good idea. She'd know how to do that. Do any of us? There's a lot of work here, which all sounds rather fun to me. The point is, a blinking cursor is not in itself a good user experience, right? We don't want to present people with this and say, now type things to the bot, because it will terrify them. But there are good reasons. At the moment, you might be thinking, well, why the hell would we use any of this bot stuff, right? We've got websites and they work, check it out. But there are good examples of why to do this. One chap in London set up a chatbot lawyer. It was for people who were appealing parking tickets. So you got a parking, anyone, hands up if you've ever had a parking ticket. You bunch of criminals. Hands up if you felt that parking ticket was unfair in some way. You can't all have been done by traffic wardens, people. Some of you must. Hands up if you think your parking ticket was entirely justified. Bonus points for honesty to you, well done. The point is, this chap set up a chatbot to talk people through the process of appealing a parking ticket that they felt was unfair. It didn't do anything massively complicated, but you could essentially imagine implementing this as a website. Did this happen? Did this happen? It asked you a series of questions, led you through this series of questions. Then at the end it told you, now do this. And then it would say, once you've done that, now do this next thing. But instead of offering it as a website where you clicked on the boxes, or as a phone number where you pressed 2 if you'd deliberately parked on double yellow lines, instead it was offered as a chatbot. Right? He did this and published it, and people started using it. And by the end, when he took it down, he'd overturned 160,000 parking tickets. That's what happens when you apply a decent, understandable, asynchronous user experience to something complicated like the legal system. There's very little I can imagine that we're building front ends for, that we're building websites for, that's more complicated than the legal system, which suggests that this is doable. And the beauty of this is you can interoperate with it from wherever you are, right? Everyone's got the capability of doing text messaging, and it doesn't matter whether you're how many of you use Facebook Messenger? WhatsApp? Telegram? This is why I haven't got any friends, obviously. Anything else? Slack, Signal, yeah. So there's a bunch of them, but you've got a bot, right? It just receives text and returns text. Plugging it into these things, well, plugging it into Slack's easy, plugging it into Facebook Messenger, reasonably easy. And that's the point. People are recognizing that these are ways to do this. So you can just publish this in all these places, and then people can deal with it from whatever device they want to, whenever they want. They can send a message and then come back to it 2, 3, 4 hours later. That's all taken care of for you. At the moment, however, if you use bots that currently exist, they're like the command line, right? They're very much, they understand rigidly formatted text, and if you get it wrong, it's like, no, syntax error. That's not what we want. Right? That's not what language is for. Right? We don't want to teach people to speak computerese. We want to teach computers to speak peopleese. And that's a challenge, don't get me wrong. What's interesting here, there's a whole bunch of complicated algorithms, and if you want to go and do a PhD, doing it in language recognition might be a good thing to do, but this isn't really about the technology of doing that. This is about the user experience, how we present that, how we want a bot to phrase its language, how we want it to pick up when there's a mistake, how we want to give people the sense that they're working through a user journey just from a sequence of messages. There are a swathe of things out there which help you with this. Microsoft have spoken about their cognitive services tools. There's Wit.ai. Google Assistant has now unified voice search in Google Now on tap. The Framer design people are looking at this. So there's a whole bunch of tools out there to do all the heavy lifting. Something where you say, I've got a random piece of text, and it comes back to you and says, this is a verb, this is a noun, this is a noun, this is an adjective, this matches your list of things, this one doesn't. Right? All the heavy lifting stuff, just rely on someone else who's got a PhD to do that for you. And then you get this back and you can concentrate on doing the work, the interesting bit, which is building something that your people like. Right? This is essentially what drove Apple's success. Right? There's nothing your iPhone or your MacBook could do that a laptop running Windows 3.11 for work groups couldn't do. But everyone can understand how it's actually done. This is the same thing that, Microsoft Drive and talk to Windows 10, everyone else is doing. This is why UX is important, right? And the other thing about this is so early for conversational interfaces that you can shape how this is going to work. Right? It's not like there's a few big players and they've already dominated the field. This is massively early. So if you get into it at this stage, you can actually shape how the conversation goes. You could be defining the next 15 years of interface. You'd be like Doug Engelbart inventing the mouse. Right? This kind of thing is absolutely doable. And it allows us to teach people how to interact with technology through words, not pointing and grunting at cave paintings. Virginia Woolf said, language is wine upon the lips. I'm aware that wine is also wine upon the lips, so I shall stop here. I'll say, I've been Stuart Langridge. Thank you for listening.